Yo, my beats, they are hard.
Of the BCSN Sports Wrap. My name is Brian Fulford, and joining me as always, my co-host, Mr. AD Drew. AD, how we doing, my man?
I'm doing fine, Dr. B. Can you smell it in the air, Brian?
Are you sure? You sound a little down. That intro, you sounded a little like you stayed up late watching the Nationals win the World Series, and you just hit the wall. Are you all right, my man?
Look, after they swept the Cardinals, I had no interest in that World Series anymore. But the World Series being over means it's crunch time in college football.
Well said, well said. All right, so those of you who have been listening to our show, you kind of know the format that we do on the preview show. We're going to be looking ahead to week number 10. That's right, we are already into the 10th weekend of college football. You know, there are only like 13, maybe 14 of these weekends. So we're already here in the fourth quarter, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and we've got playoff races, key matchups in various conferences that will shape the final standings, so on and so forth. So let's get into it, but first I got to make sure you know that when you are listening to us, we want to encourage you to find us and interact with our shows. You can find our shows primarily, you can start with mybcsn.net, and that's where you'll find, under broadcast, you'll find our Sports Wrap show. You'll also find some different articles and things under the news section. When we do our broadcasts, like this upcoming weekend, actually, we're doing a live broadcast of Tuskegee traveling to Edward Waters on Friday night. That's where you'll be able to see the broadcast of that under the Edward Waters page. You can also sometimes, when Langston University is having a home game, you'll see their home games as well under the broadcast tab. Of course, on Facebook, you can find us at MyBCSN1. That's the Black College Sports Network page. You can also find our show on our show page on Facebook as well. And then on Twitter and Instagram, find us at MyBCSN1. So, AD, let's start first and foremost. I want to start with our polls. The recently released BCSN Top 5 Division I and the Under D1 football poll recently released. And what I thought, I'm just going to go down and kind of talk about the Under D1 here, because that's the one that changed the most from last week. You know, obviously last week we had one team win, that was Bowie State, and we had 4 teams lose. And in the midst of 4 teams losing, we have 3 new entries into the polls this week. So, of course, number 1 still is the Bowie State Bulldogs, 8-0, 5-0 in the conference, and I believe in the division of the CIAA they are either 3-0 or 4-0. But last weekend we saw them dominating.
They would be 3-0, Brian. They still have 2 division games left.
Okay, last week they dominated previously ranked number 2 Virginia Union 52-17. That was a game in which Jerome Johnson, quarterback for Bowie, threw 5 touchdown passes and 395 yards passing. The Bulldogs gained nearly 600 yards of total offense. And then, of course, the great week and the accolades continue to come out for Bowie State, as they were ranked 3rd in the first released NCAA Division II Super Region II rankings and these are the rankings that help decide the top 7 teams that go on and play in the Division II playoffs from 4 different regions. And there's a great article that AD put together under the news section regarding his predictions and his thoughts on how he sees things shaking out in the Division II polls. So this upcoming week, Bowie State has their final home game of the season against Lincoln, PA. That's winless Lincoln, PA. And who do they have the final week of the season, regular season, AD?
That would be Elizabeth City.
Elizabeth City State, okay. They've been playing some pretty interesting games as of late. I mean, obviously Bowie will be favored, but I think that will be a little more interesting in terms of scoring than probably the Lincoln, PA game this upcoming weekend. Number 2,
yes.
Yeah, number 2 for the first time this season in our poll, and literally it's quite unprecedented that a team comes in from out of nowhere and jumps right in to number 2. Now, I will note, AD, I have been voting for them the last couple weeks, so it's good to see you other folks in the poll finally get on board with me here. But I'm talking about the Fort Valley State Wildcats, who are on a 6-game winning streak, just coming off of a 34-27 win against Clark Atlanta. They had to rally in the fourth quarter, down 27-20 to win that ball game. The Wildcats, take note of this. The Wildcats lost their first 2 games of the season. They lost to Miles College, the defending SIAC champs, and currently 6-2 record. And then the next week, they lost to Florida A&M. Florida A&M we'll talk about in just a second, number 1 in our polls, and currently 7-1 overall. And so Fort Valley lost those 2 games and then have gone on a 6-game winning streak, including 4-0 in the conference. And they are in the midst of their longest winning streak in over 12 years. And so the Fort Valley State Wildcats jump into the polls, and they've got a big matchup against Savannah State this upcoming weekend, which we will be talking about, and that may very well determine who wins the SIAC East. It'll have a major impact, no doubt. Number 3, West Virginia State, the Yellow Jackets. 1 week they lost and they dropped out of our poll. Now another close win, another win. And AD, this team just look. If you go back and look at their record and the number of games that they've been playing in the close contest, it's going to make quite a yearbook when you go back and look at what they have done this year. This time they had to rally trailing by, I think, 3 or 4 points and ended up winning with 10 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. And so, Coach John Pennington's team got their 6th conference win. They're 6-2, and then they were ranked number 5 in the Division II Super Region 1. So, it's been a great week for West Virginia State. Have you seen a team do anything like what West Virginia State is doing?
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure they've got some defibrillators and some high blood pressure medicine real close to the coaching staff over there at West Virginia State, because of the 8 games that they have played, 7 of them have been determined by 1 touchdown or less, Brian. Talk about drama. And for them to come out 6-2 when 7 of your games have been decided by a touchdown or less, that's real impressive that a team knows how to close and how to handle their business when it comes down to the end, Brian.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's funny, the game that they lost last week, they thought they had won that game because they took the lead with like 50-something seconds left, and then they ended up giving up a score with about 30 seconds left, like 20, 30 seconds later. That cost them a game. So, I mean, it's, again, the yearbook, the season's not over. They still have, I think, 3 more weeks left. But I tell you, the yearbook on this team is going to be amazing to look back on. But already, it's probably one of the best stories in the black college football season, in my opinion. Number 4, Miles College. Now, Miles, I believe, is the only team that lost from last week that stayed in the polls this week. Previously, they were ranked number 3. They lost 15-13 on the road on a muddy field in Central State, Ohio, on a 34-yard field goal with just a second or two remaining in the fourth quarter. It snapped the Golden Bears' 4-game winning streak, but they still are in first place in the SIAC West. This week, Miles takes on Kentucky State at home. In your opinion, AD, do you think it was the close loss that kept Miles in the poll and, is the reason why they didn't get bounced like 3 other teams?
I think it would, but those factors and just a matter of default, because so many teams, so many top-rated teams lost last week. With 4 of our top 5, and then a couple of teams just outside of our poll losing last week. Somebody was going to wind up staying in by default. It just happened to be Miles, according to the voters.
All right, well said. And number 5 coming in, the Langston Lions, Langston University, another team that had dropped out 1 week after a tough loss, and this time they rebounded with a 69-7 homecoming win over Texas Wesleyan. Of course, Langston just 2 weeks ago had an unbelievable conference winning streak snapped, had not lost a conference game since 2016 until they lost to Ottawa University in Arizona 2 weekends ago. Jordan Cooper, quarterback for Langston, he not only rushed for 158 yards in 12 attempts where he scored 3 times, he was 20 of 30 passing for 206 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper. Have yourself a big day, and we'll see how that continues to roll. This week, Langston travels to Southwestern Assemblies of God University in, let me make sure I get this right, Waxahachie. Yeah, I think it's Waxahachie, Texas. Have you ever been to Waxahachie, Texas?
Well, the acronym SWAG for your school's nickname just puts that school on a whole other level, Brian.
Oh, you're right. Southwestern Assemblies of God, SWAG. Yeah.
SWAG.
SWAG.
Yes,
SWAG
yes.
U. I mean, that's got to draw the kids
SWAG,
in, right?
SWAG U in Waxahachie, Texas.
That's got to draw the kids in. That might be the best school acronym that I've ever heard right there.
You throw that in. You throw that in with some Oregon Duck uniforms, and you're going to get a lot of kids going to that school.
No doubt. All right, moving over to the BCSN top 5 in the D1. We've got the same list of teams that we have practiced. Well, I won't say that we've had. Well, no, we have. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's the same group of teams since our first week of the polls, but it feels that way.
I think UAPB may have been the only team that was in the poll initially.
Okay, instead of FAMU being in the poll, right? You may be right.
Right.
Okay.
And then they dropped out with their loss the first week of our poll.
Right. Okay. So for the second consecutive week, the Florida A&M Rattlers hold on to the number 1 spot. They went on the road and picked up a victory against Morgan State, 24-14 last week, to improve to 7-1, 5-0 in the conference. The Rattlers basically took care of business in the first half. I believe they only gave up a safety in the second half of that game to Morgan State. It wasn't a pretty game, but the Rattlers covered the 9.5, and so by all intents and purposes, they met expectations, and so we don't penalize them in any way for that. This weekend, the Rattlers return home to take on Delaware State. Delaware State had a heartbreaking loss last weekend to North Carolina Central, essentially on what was a kickoff return with like 50-something seconds left after they had scored to tie the game up, and then they turned around and gave up a 75-yard kick return touchdown. Florida A&M does not leave the state of Florida for their last 3 games of the season. Hosting Delaware State, then hosting Howard, and then, of course, their big showdown against Bethune-Cookman and the Florida Classic, which played in Orlando, Florida. Number 2 in our poll, the Alcorn State Braves moving up a spot. I believe previously they were number 3. They got a big win by defeating Southern 27-13. The Braves, who are 6-2 now, 4-0 in the SWAC, they were trailing 6-3 at halftime before, they outscored Southern 24-6 at half, or in the second half. Probably a lot had to do with the dedication ceremony to the late Steve Air McNair at halftime, where they retired his number. And then, of course, in that great spirit of Air McNair, the offense finally woke up, and the Braves ended up getting a win. This week they're on a bye week, and then they travel to Grambling State on November 9th. Number 3 in our poll, North Carolina A&T, the Aggies, got a huge homecoming win over Howard, 64-6, in front of a sellout crowd of 21,000 people. Running back Jermaine Martin, 7 carries, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Talk about efficiency. The Aggies moved up from number 4 to number 3 in the polls and improved to 5-2, 3-1. And this weekend, a big, what they call the Border State Showdown against South Carolina State. The winner of that contest, as I like to say, the loser of this contest really needs a lot of things to happen for them to have a shot at getting the Celebration Bowl berth. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Speaking of South Carolina State, they are number 4. They are 5-2, 3-1. They got a big win on the road, ruining Bethune-Cookman's homecoming 27-19 victory over the Wildcats. Speaking of the Wildcats, of course, they dropped 3 spots in our poll with the loss, moving from number 2 all the way down to number 5. This week, the Wildcats are on a bye, get a chance to lick those wounds. They're still 6-2 overall, 4-1 in the conference, and they're kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens. I have a feeling they will be rooting for North Carolina A&T to win this game, so that way when they get a chance to play North Carolina A&T, they have a shot at knocking them off. But things won't be looking good for the Wildcats if South Carolina State would win, because that would then mean South Carolina State would have the tiebreaker over Bethune, who would have 1 loss, and they would have the tiebreaker over A&T, and South Carolina State has already played Florida A&M, so essentially there are no more quote-unquote tough opponents for South Carolina State. What are your thoughts on the top 5 polls there, AD? Is there any chance we might see another FCS team crack into our top 5, or do you think the rest of the season is just going to be these guys?
Well, somebody's going to crack in at number 5 next week, Brian. You've got number 3 playing number 4. So the chances of us having a new number 5, because one of those teams is going to lose, is growing to be great this particular week. And I'm assuming that the teams who are just outside of our polls, such as a Jackson State, such as a UAPB, will have the opportunity to will win. They have to win. If they win, and number 3 and number 4 is one of them is guaranteed to lose, we're going to have somebody new into our polls for the first time in about 3 or 4 weeks, Brian.
I'm surprised you didn't mention Alabama A&M. I mean, they just won a.
Yes, Alabama A&M is also another candidate to sneak into the polls, into that spot. For the first time in 3-4 weeks, we're going to have a second SWAC team in our poll next week.
Okay. Let's kind of transition off of the BCSN, our poll, our top 5 poll. And you wrote a great column this past week regarding the Division II rankings. And so want to encourage people to go read that. And I know, we talked about those scenarios on our last show that we did, our Week 9 wrap-up. But what are just your general, anything maybe that you, just give people the summary, I guess, the Cliff Notes version of your column, and maybe anything new or any additional thoughts that you've had over the last couple of days since the column was published.
Well, I'll start off with it's great to see 4 of our HBCUs ranked in the top 10 going into in the initial poll. That means our teams have a great opportunity to represent us in the Division II playoffs. We know one team is going to drop out the polls. We don't know which team it's going to be. It's going to be one of the Virginia schools. Virginia State is number 7, Virginia Union at number 9. They go head up the last week of the year. Once again, somebody has to lose. That team is out. We know we're not going to have one of those. It's interesting that Virginia State came in at number 7 in the poll. Going back, crunching the numbers, and using the math, not using your head, not using your heart, using the math. Virginia State has a very, very good RPI, which is one of the big factors that goes into determining these teams' ranking. What surprised me is Bowie coming in at number 3 ahead of Wingate. I in my mock poll, I had Bowie coming in at number 4 instead of number 3. First of all, there's going to be some movement behind Bowie State. Valdosta State plays West Florida, and I believe Lenore Ryan and Wingate play each other. And Valdosta State plays they play West Georgia at the end of the season. So Valdosta State playing West Georgia, there's going to be movement between Bowie and Virginia State. That gives Virginia State an opportunity to move up. Carson Newman has a tough schedule going out the door. Virginia State has the opportunity to move up to 6 or number 5, depending on what they do. If Virginia State wins out, they can finish as high as 5, Brian. Let's keep that in mind. Number 2, SIAC. What is it going to take for an SIAC team to get in? As you know, teams have to be in the top 7. Unless you're a conference champion, you can come in as low as 9, and then you would bump out the lowest remaining team, which in this case would be number 7. That's why it's important for Virginia State to win out and move up to that 6 or that 5 slot so that we don't bump another HBCU out to get our SIAC champion in. Albany State is in right now. Surprisingly, Albany State is in right now. They do have one of the top strength of schedules in this region. I believe their strength of schedule is actually number 3 in this particular region, Brian. So what happens if Albany State loses the SIAC championship, or even worse, doesn't even make it to the SIAC championship game? Fort Valley has an excellent opportunity to get in. Fort Valley with a victory over Savannah State and over Albany State, and them winning the SIAC championship should be enough for them to get to that number 9 slot, which will get us our SIAC champion in. Miles, on the other hand, who is leading the Western Division, is going to need a lot of help in order to get in. They have one of the lowest strength of schedules in this particular division, Brian. So that's the Cliff Notes version of what's going on in Super Region 2. In Super Region 1, West Virginia State is our lone representative in West Virginia 1. In Super Region 1. They have 2 tough games remaining on their schedule with Notre Dame of Ohio, who is ahead of them at number 3, and then their matchup this weekend with Charleston, who sits directly behind them in the standings in the Mountain East Conference. Virginia State has 3 games remaining. They have to win 2 of those remaining 3 games in order to maintain their spot in Super Region 1. So I've pretty much covered everything HBCU related to in the Division II polls. Shoot with the questions, Brian.
Yeah. So, do you think there are what's the likelihood? Let's take some of the upcoming matchups and how those may affect uh, these polls and some of the matchups that I'm referring to. Obviously, we have a big one happening this weekend. Fort Valley State at Savannah State, a game we're going to talk about a little bit later in this pod. That's a big game. That's going to have.
Fort Valley has to win. Fort
Okay,
Valley
so
has to win that game.
now let's just say so a Fort Valley win. Now, obviously, again, a Savannah State win would essentially put them at 5-0, having won every game in the SIAC East, and would instantly put them in the championship game. Correct?
Correct. It would screw the SIAC because a Savannah State win pretty much knocks the SIAC out of the playoffs.
And again, for people who aren't familiar, what is the factoring again as to why Savannah State is not eligible for the Division II playoffs this year?
It's their first year coming down from Division I. It's like an automatic rule that they cannot play they cannot play beyond conference champion. It's up to the conference to allow them to play for championships, but they cannot play in the NCAAs their first year when you come down.
So do you think
there has to be they have certain stipulations that they have to do. They have to reduce scholarships. They have to reduce a few other things to get with their Division II standards from the higher Division I standards. Even though Savannah State has probably met all of those standards as of right now, but it's still that 1-year moratorium mandated by the NCAA.
Do you think that the SIC made a mistake in allowing Savannah State to be able to compete for the conference tournament this year instead of doing something similar? Now, obviously, Edward Waters is not a member yet, but they are playing SIAC schools this year. Do you think that the SIAC made a mistake in allowing them to be eligible to play in the conference championship when they couldn't play for or they couldn't compete in Division II? Or here's the follow-up to that question. Now, Savannah State was picked to finish last. And I said at that media day that was my dark horse team because statistically they were coming off of having one of the best defenses in the MEAC. And I knew when I heard Coach Sean Quinn say, "Oh yeah, we're running the triple option this year," I said, "What? You're going to introduce a new offense that nobody else in the conference is running? Oh, I know that's going to give people fits." So I kind of felt in the back of my mind, even though there were a lot of other teams, matter of fact, 6 other teams received the first place vote in the preseason, Savannah State was picked last. Do you think that the SIAC just wasn't worried, or they had like no kind of foreshadowing in mind that, you know what, Savannah State might become a problem if we let them? What are your thoughts on that?
Savannah State has won the sum total of SWAC over the last 20 years. No one expected.
Wait a minute, say that again.
Savannah State has won the sum total of SWAC over the last 20 years. No one expected.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. I was looking. I was like, is that a number? Is the sum total of SWAC a number? I missed that for a second. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was like, what number is that?
That is 0. Savannah State hasn't had a winning season in 20 years. No one expected that the come down from Division I to Division II would be that beneficial for this particular team. Let's be real, Brian. So no, the SIAC did not anticipate this. Was not planning for this, and after Saturday may have egg on their face. No better way to put it, Brian. Miles was expected to be there. Miles was expected to be ranked higher. The loss to Central State is really hurting Miles right now, especially when you consider the fact they played no other region teams, no other Division II teams within the region outside of their conference. And the SIAC of the four conferences that makes up this super region has the lowest rating. So Miles has many factors going against them. Miles will need a lot of help getting in, whereas a Fort Valley State, if they went out, will get in.
And you know what's funny about all this? The MEAC has a rule in place that says if you're ineligible to play a postseason bowl or a playoffs, you can't win the conference. Now, that is what is staring Florida A&M in the face because of the self-imposed postseason ban that they're saying we're not eligible or we're taking ourselves out of consideration. So even though FAMU is favored or very likely to run the table and potentially be unbeaten, 8-0, beating everybody in the conference, finish 10-1, might even be Black College National Champions. The one thing that they won't be in the eyes of the conference is the MEAC champions because the MEAC has this rule in place. And it's like it makes you wonder, hey, next year, I bet you anything the SIAC puts a new rule in place that says if you are ineligible for the playoffs in whatever reason or manner, you are ineligible to compete in the championship game. I bet you $100 million that I don't have, that some new rule gets put in place to prevent this from happening again. Almost like what they did. Didn't they enact some kind of rule when Kentucky State got into the championship game a few years back?
They did away with division record, because Kentucky State came in with like a 3-7 record or something ridiculous like that, 4-6, something along those lines. But because they won their region, their their division, they wound up going to the championship game. So yes, that's when they went. That's when they went to all games counted, and then your division became like the second or the third tiebreaker, versus you just had to win your division at that point in time.
Now, what's interesting, and the last thing I guess that I wanted to bring up regarding the polls, a lot of these are human polls, and we have our friends over at Versus, the Versus Sports Simulator from the ComputerRatings.com website. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com, and they have, they actually a part of this mass of computer. I was looking at it the other day, AD. There's about 20 different computer ratings that are put out there, and you could kind of take a look at them and kind of see, what these different polls rank a school, and something that I found interesting as it relates to Division II. Now, we talked about West Virginia State being a part of the Mountain East, and they're the team that's in first place in that conference, Notre Dame, Ohio, is currently ranked 18th as the top-seeded school from the Mountain East. But West Virginia State actually comes in ranked 42nd, and they actually sit in 42nd behind two other conference teams, Frostburg State, who's 36, and Urbana, who's 40. And I actually think West Virginia State beat Urbana a couple of weeks ago. So West Virginia State is actually the top rated in terms of our Versus rankings. They're the top rated HBCU in Division II. Bowie State comes in at 44. So that's kind of, again, there's not much movement happening, and I think a product of that is the conferences. But then over on the FCS side, obviously the MEAC and SWAC are not competing for the FCS playoffs, but even though the human polls I think, have FAMU this week at number 17 or 18 or somewhere in there, and I don't even know, A&T may be somewhere ranked behind them, still in the top 25. The computers, or at least from the Versus rankings, loves Florida A&M. Florida A&M comes in at number 8. That's right. They're a top 10 team in the nation, sitting behind teams like North Dakota State, who is the undisputed right now #1 team in FCS football, behind Sacramento State, James Madison, South Dakota State, Central Arkansas, and then they're sitting at number 8 is Florida A&M, 7-1 record. And I saw one computer poll that had FAMU ranked number 2. No lie, AD, ranked as high as number 2 in FCS football. And so, yeah, well, a part of that, and I was talking with Steve Pugh from ComputerRatings.com, and he helped me understand a lot of it is not only your record, but your opponent's record, your opponent's record, and the opponent's record. That I think
Bryan,
Yeah.
Bryan,
I know. Don't try to do that at home.
No, you just described RPI.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, the fact that the quote unquote RPI for a Florida A&M is so good, and again, it's good because A&T, South Carolina State, Southern, even UCF, who they played and lost to at the beginning of the year, all teams with great records, and Fort Valley State, a Division II school, but still sitting with a record of 6-2. So I'm telling you, all of that is in place there, and it's interesting how the computers view the HBCUs versus the human polls. All right, AD, let's take a break. Go ahead. You have something you want to add? I'm sorry.
One thing that you know when you talk about differences in polls, Bryan, if you look at the different super region polls and compare them to the D2.com poll or the AFCA coaches polls, there are a lot of discrepancies between those polls, whereas the regional rankings use a little bit more of computer rankings, go into it a lot more than the human polls that make up the top 25 polls.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I heard about that, so you got me going here, one of the things that I heard about that discrepancy, and I think I was listening to a podcast on D2Football.com, that was from Monday, the fact that the regional rankings, they take into consideration road games. It's like, so, and for some schools that can be hard because teams don't want to play you. I think they brought up an example, Grand Valley, I think, is a school they mentioned in the podcast that I was listening to. I wish I could remember the guy's name. It was actually their I don't know if he's called their CEO or creator, but anyway, he's one of the main guys over there. He covers the national view of Division II football. But Grand Valley State, a team that is 7-1 right now, he was saying that Grand Valley State always has a difficulty finding other teams to play, and so they don't necessarily have maybe a great road record, or their opponents may not be very good because they're not able to get too many
non-conference quality opponents, I guess.
Right, yeah. So I mean, their opponents' records, they sort of get penalized. I mean, their opponents' records this year is 23-37. So they don't get to play very many of the best teams. I'm kind of just glancing through. They've got teams on their schedule that are 2-6, 0-8, 1-6. So I mean, yeah, they're not. They're sort of being penalized a little bit by not only maybe their conference, but just they're unable to kind of to reach out and find teams. It's one of those things that hurts. It's always something, and I think that's what, we talked about this previously earlier in the week about what ails the CIAA and the fact that they're unable to beat teams in the SAC, which is in their region, and then, of course, the SIAC, I don't know.
They can't beat the Gulf South. Just say it.
Yeah, they can't beat the Gulf South. So I don't even think, are they even beating the CIAA? I don't think they are.
They didn't this year.
You're right. So see, that kind of stuff hurts. But all right, anything else you want to?
Which is why the SIAC of the 4 teams in that region is number 4.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we kind of take a break and then come back?
No, just go and read the article. It gets a lot more in depth. There will be a follow-up next week as we go into the final week of the HBCU season before we get into the championship games in our 2 conferences. But the PWI conferences have 2 more weeks to go, so there will be 2 more follow-ups to this article.
All right. Great job, AD. When we come back, we're going to start getting into our top 7 games for this upcoming weekend. After this timeout, you are listening to and watching the BCSN Sports Wrap on the Black College Sports Network. We'll be back right after this.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MYMAJESTEAS.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
The Black College Sports Network is proud to partner with ComputerRatings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com for the upcoming college football season. ComputerRatings.com delivers rankings, game predictions, and statistics for hundreds of professional and collegiate teams. The key feature of ComputerRatings.com is the Versus Sports Simulator, which allows users to simulate any possible matchup and view the predicted scores along with a side-by-side stats analysis. Improve your odds by signing up for a subscription. Monthly, semi-yearly, and yearly subscriptions are available. For our listeners and viewers, use the promo code BCSN19 and get 15% off of your subscription at checkout. Visit www.computerratings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com. Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and AD Drew here, and we are getting ready to break down the first of our 7 big games for week number 10 of the Black College football season, HBCU football season. At some point after we do this, or when we get a couple of maybe games in here, I did want to make sure that we mention just a quick little shout out to the basketball conferences, the SWAC, the MEAC, and the GCAC, as basketball season is around the corner. It's starting for many of the schools who are in exhibition games this past week. Actually, the GCAC actually started playing their regular season games. And so a lot of teams, now that the month of October is ending, a lot of teams will kind of begin playing their first regular season games, if not this upcoming weekend, definitely going into next week. So it'll be pretty busy. You've got football season coming towards its final weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. You've got the volleyball finishing up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think your other fall sports are done. Cross country and golf, I think those are done.
And tennis.
And anything else I'm missing from the fall that's concluding?
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so from the winter, you're about to start getting into men and women's basketball. Any other winter sports that I'm thinking of?
Swimming, possibly.
Swimming? I thought they did swimming in the spring.
Indoor track.
Oh, okay. Yeah, indoor track. Yeah. I should mention that the HBCUs that play soccer, they do soccer. Soccer is considered a fall sport, so there are some HBCUs that have soccer. So those who are playing soccer, they're probably finishing up their season as well. All right. So here's the rundown of our top 7 games for this week. And, of course, there's a full listing of games. If you want to see what they are, I just recommend you go to ownitin.com. Or for the shortcut, you can simply go to ownitin2, that's the number 2.com, and that will take you right to the Ownitin schedule. And that's where you can see the full list of HBCU games, as well as links to not only maybe streaming or what station or what broadcast those games will be played on, also live stats. So pretty much it's a great tool to use when you're looking to see whether your team is playing. So the first game on our docket for week number 10, the University of Charleston traveling to take on West Virginia State Yellow Jackets, a Mountain East showdown for our Yellow Jacket friends. AD has the breakdown on this game. What do we got, AD?
We first of all, we've got a must win for West Virginia State. We've already said they are coming in number 5 in their super region, and they need to go ahead and get this victory over this particular team right here, the University of Charleston. Now, here's the skinny. Bryan, West Virginia State in their last 8 games is 1-7 versus Charleston. Let me repeat that. They are 1-7 in their last 8 games versus Charleston. That one victory came in 2018, and that was at home. They are at home again this year. And Bryan, just kind of give you the discrepancy. Charleston has won this game by an average of 17 points, Bryan. Do you need me to repeat that, Bryan?
No, that's pretty significant. Wow.
They are winning this game by an average of 17 points. Now, as far as the standings go, Charleston is sitting in 5th place overall in the MEAC with a 5-3 overall record, 4-3 in the MEAC, versus West Virginia, who's in 3rd place with a 6-2 record, 6-1 in conference. West Virginia State is 2-1 at home, 4-1 away from home. Charleston is 3-1 at home, 2-2 away from home. So you're hoping that for West Virginia State that 500 record on the road for Charleston is going to play out in this particular game. Let's just break down a couple of numbers, Bryan, and then we're going to get into this into the predictions. West Virginia State comes in with averaging 31 points a game. Charleston's averaging 33.5 points a game. On the flip side, West Virginia State is giving up 33 points a game. We know that's a little bit skewed because of that blowout that they had to Southeast Missouri. Charleston giving up 28 points a game, 28.6 points per game, Bryan. Total offense, West Virginia State comes in averaging 448 yards per game of total offense compared to Charleston's 431 yards per game of total offense. So fairly even on the offensive side. West Virginia State's giving up 454 yards of offense, Brian, compared to Charleston only giving up 334 yards per game. Brian, just looking at the big stats, it all of the stats favor Charleston, Brian. I just can't put it in any other way. All of the stats favor Charleston in this particular game. One thing that may benefits West Virginia State, they have protected their quarterback, only giving up 9 sacks on the year. Charleston is smack dab in the middle of the conference, having scored 16 sacks on this particular year. So hopefully West Virginia State can protect their quarterback. Every number that you look at, Brian, it favors West Virginia State. But it's something about West Virginia State. They have shown the grit to pull out and win close games. Do I think they have another one in them? I'm going to go with my head probably this time more than my heart. Excuse me, I'm going to rephrase it. I'm going to go with my heart more than my head. My head says Charleston's going to win this game. But my heart says West Virginia State is going to win this game. They need to get this game. They need to get this game to pretty much guarantee themselves in the playoffs, and they are at home. So I'm going to go with West Virginia State in this particular game, Brian.
One of the things that I was looking up here on the Versus Sports Simulator as it relates to this game, they have a section that goes over best win, worst loss, largest margin of victory, largest margin of defeat. When it's called under superlative. So when you looking at the Versus Sports Simulator and you match up two teams, they give you these kind of very cool comparisons. Listen to this. Both teams' worst loss came to Urbana of Ohio. Both teams lost to Urbana, Ohio, who is overall, and every college, and this is every college football team in America, 222nd, okay? The best win that West Virginia State has had this year came against Frostburg State. Now, if you remember earlier, Frostburg State was one of those schools I mentioned in the Versus rankings that are, I believe they are ranked somewhere within 10 spots ahead of 42nd, which is where West Virginia is. Frostburg State happens to be Charleston's largest margin of defeat. They lost to Frostburg by 35 points. So you have one team whose best win came against Frostburg and another team whose worst or largest margin of defeat. It wasn't quite their worst loss, but it was just the largest margin of defeat came to that team. I think that's significant. You know, you mentioned a lot of the other stats are kind of even. I mean, opponents' records are 30 and 34. The average rank of each opponent is in the 345 to 355 range. That's again, every team in football, college football, I should say. And they're both coming in with a winning streak. They've all had a 3-game winning streak this year. You were about to say something, AD. You sounded like you were going to jump in there.
I was going to say, when you take the records of the opponents, keep in mind something with that. That stat could almost be thrown out with this particular conference because there are 11 teams in this conference. Everybody plays everybody. So 10 of your 11 games are already set. You have 10 common opponents, Brian, or 9 common opponents. So there's only one wild card game that each of these teams has, Brian. So
that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, at this point
one stat could be thrown out the window because everybody's playing everybody in that conference. So that should balance out.
Okay, that's fair. But I will say what I think is significant though is the Frostburg State. The fact that your best win is somebody's worst loss. I think that says advantage West Virginia State. And even though the versus simulation favors Charleston, I think West Virginia State, again, has that knack and the ability to win games late. I won't be surprised if it's another fourth quarter comeback of some sort in which all these points just seem to come out of nowhere. But I'll tell you, right now, Austin Hensley, and I was just taking a gander at what he did last week. He led all of Black College football with 28 completions and 54 attempts, leading all of Black College football. Again, threw for 382 yards, no interceptions. He's the straw that turns the drink for West Virginia. I'm going to side with you, and I'm going to go with West Virginia State. And I'm going to actually flip that score that I saw in the versus simulator, and I'm going to say West Virginia State wins 38-35. So, all right, let's advance to our next game. Game number 2. The Shaw Bears traveling on the road, taking on Winston-Salem State, the Rams. It's the homecoming game for the Rams in a very interesting CIAA South Division game. I mean, now that Fayetteville State actually has a loss under their belt, it really opens the door for Winston-Salem State. I think Shaw has already played Fayetteville State, if I'm not mistaken. I can't recall. But at least for the Rams, who have not played Fayetteville State yet, if they can keep winning heading into that game against Fayetteville State, they could technically knock Fayetteville State out of the conference championship game that they have gone to, I believe, the last 3 seasons. So,
and you're correct with that. Winston-Salem has Fayetteville next week for the final week of the CIAA season.
Right.
So a Winston-Salem victory over the next 2 weeks will put them in the championship game against Bowie State. What's interesting about this game, Brian? Both teams come in with the same identical 4-4 record and 3-2 in the league standings. The difference is the Rams are 3-0 in the division, in the South Division, whereas the Bears are 2-1 with that loss to, as you said, Fayetteville State on October 12th.
Right. So carry on. I'm going to get out of the way and let you break this game down. Shaw at Winston-Salem State.
All right. Shaw is coming off a 36-19 victory over Johnson C. Smith that was on the road, and Winston-Salem State is coming off a win, defeating Livingstone 21-0 in its last game. Shaw ranks 6th in the league in points at 27.1. Winston-Salem is 8th at 20.1. 27.1 for Shaw, 20.1 for Winston-Salem State. The Rams rank 2nd in the league in defense as far as points per game goes, giving up 15.5. Shaw Bears are 8th, 27.5. This is the 25th meeting between these two programs, Brian. Winston-Salem leads the all-time series 13-9-2. But Shaw won last year 26-21. And that game was in Durham last year. So I've thrown out a couple of numbers at you. Who do I think is going to win this particular game, Brian? Winston-Salem State's defense is better than Shaw's defense. Shaw's offense, we know Shaw can score. Can Winston-Salem stop Shaw from scoring that one or two possessions to give their offense a chance? I think it happens in this particular game, Brian. I'm picking the Rams of Winston-Salem State.
Ooh, you're okay. Going with the Rams here, okay?
Yeah, I want to see that matchup next week. I want to see Winston-Salem and Fayetteville with all the money on the line.
I do too, because if I'm not mistaken, that's the matchup from last year that I believe Winston-Salem Fayetteville State got curb stomped last year by Winston-Salem State. And then, of course, that was the game in which all I remember is I kept looking back on the score thinking, is that right? I mean, how could Fayetteville State, 1 week away from their conference championship game showdown against Bowie, and they were having a great season, how could they just get beat down by just an average, when I mean average, I mean an average record, Winston-Salem team? I mean, they got beat down. So I think that the rematch for that is going to be pretty good. So, I mean, all that to say, I was looking through, I was trying to see if there was anything in particular that kind of stood out in the versus simulations. The only thing I could come up with, AD, is that Shaw has had a tougher road. They're probably a little more battle tested in terms of the opponents that they have played this year. Now, you mentioned you kind of poo-pooed on my opponent's record as it related to the Mountain East because everybody plays each other. Well, it's a little bit different in the CIAA where everyone does not play everybody. And so when I say Shaw opponents have a record of 35-28 and Winston-Salem's opponents have a record of 30-34, you say what to that statistic?
You need to take that into consideration. Shaw has played a tougher schedule, and their route to their 4-4 versus Winston-Salem State, who has played a lighter schedule en route to their 4-4. But the Winston-Salem schedule has been pretty competitive. 30-34 is not that bad. We've seen a heck of a lot worse, Brian, with record disparity. So it is what it is. But on paper, that's going to mean Shaw's opponents are a little bit better, which means Shaw's record should be a little bit better.
Yeah, and let's not forget, the largest margin of defeat for Winston-Salem this year is 10 points. I mean, they have lost 4 games, and no game they have lost by more than 10 points. I mean, that is pretty impressive, and it just goes to illustrate, especially there was early in the season a couple of games that they lost by 1 possession, 1 score. So this is a team, Winston-Salem, that could very much be, 6-2, maybe 7-1 if some things broke a certain way for them. And so I got to go with Winston-Salem on this one. I'm going to side with you and go with the Rams in a tough game against Shaw. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page with that one. All right, you ready to move on to the third game?
Let's roll.
All right, third game on our docket is actually a SWAC contest. It is I'm pulling up my final notes here. Is actually an intra. I'll make sure I'm saying that, an inter-division matchup. Did I say that right? Inter-division, or is it intra? I always get this messed up.
Inter means within
okay.
the same division.
Okay, so it's definitely not that. It is an interdivision showdown between Arkansas Pine Bluff, who is in the SWAC West, with a record of 5-3 overall, 2-2 in the conference, sitting in second place behind Southern, and then Jackson State over in the SWAC East, sitting with a record of 3-5 overall. They are 2-1 in the conference. They're actually tied with Alabama A&M in second place. With Alcorn State having a bye week, it's a chance for each of these teams or for Jackson State to move within one game, to move within one full game of Alcorn State, who they play later. And for Arkansas Pine Bluff, though, they're sitting one game back of Southern, and Southern doesn't have an easy game. So an Arkansas win combined with a Southern loss, even though they won't necessarily jump Southern because Southern right now has a tiebreaker, it would put them right there with Southern and puts even more pressure on the Jaguars. So UAPB comes in, I already mentioned, with a record of 5-3. Last year, Jackson State won this contest 30-27. In fact, Jackson State has won 5 of the last 6 games, 6 of the last 9 games. The last time UAPB won at Jackson State, which is where this game is, it was 34-27. And I didn't write down the year, so shame on me. So I have no idea what year that happened, but I think it happened sometime within the last 7 to 8 years. That's shameful. I hate when you do that. Overall, like I said, Jackson State coming off of 2 overtime wins the last 2 weeks.
That was 2017. 34-27 was in 2017, Brian.
Okay, so just 2 seasons ago. Thank you for quickly pulling that up. And yeah, so Jackson State having come off of 2 consecutive overtime victories, and UAPB just had the disappointing loss to Grambling. You combine that with the disappointing loss to Southern, and this is about as must-win for UAPB as you get. So I would put that. I just want to lay that out there that it's about as must-win as you get for this team. Their best win, they actually do have a win over Alabama A&M. Have a tough loss to Grambling State, and so that's what's at stake here. UAPB averaging 34 points a game. Jackson State averaging 26.1 points against. Jackson State's defense is not what we expected it to be. They've allowed 36 points per game this year. UAPB, on the other side of that, they have only allowed 29 points per game. So, I think whenever your points per game is significantly greater than your points against, I think you're going in the right direction. Jackson State, of course, I already mentioned the 2-game winning streak that they're coming in on. UAPB with a tough loss last week. The Versus Simulator seems to lean heavily on Arkansas Pine Bluff on the road, and I actually kind of like UAPB on the road. I mean, they're 2-1 away from home. Jackson State winless at home. I mean, Jackson State has fared well on the road and on a neutral site, but they're 0-2 at home, and that doesn't bode well for them. After going out on the road and winning the last 2. So I'm going to side. I don't know about you, AD, on this one, but I'm going to side with the Road Warriors, the Arkansas Pine Bluff Golden Lions, who are predicted to win this game by 12 points over Jackson State. What do you think? Who do you have in this game?
If Arkansas Pine Bluff wins this game, it will not be by 12 points, Brian, first of all. This game is going to be much closer than that, as both of these teams try to establish their their running game. Jackson State, and I've said this before, controls its own destiny in the SWAC. They went out. They're in the SWAC championship game. It's that simple. So they're getting it home for the first time in a couple of weeks. Those fans in Jackson, Tennessee, are going to be ready and rowdy for this particular game. Kimani Clark, Keyshawn Harper, you're going to get a heavy dose of them if you're UAPB. You're going to get a heavy dose of those two rushing the ball. Ken Taylor Porter finally had that breakout game this year. He's been good, but he hasn't had that stellar breakout game that we were expecting from him as one of the top backs in the SWAC. Splitting time with Keyshawn Williams back there. So I expect this to be a ground and pound game for both of these teams, Brian. And wow, I mean, I don't know which way to lean. You got Harry Ballard III out there at receiver. You've got Shannon Patrick throwing the ball to him. On paper, UAPB is the better team, Brian. Jackson State is on the road. I'm going to go with you, Brian. UAPB.
AD, for a second you had it set up like you were going to say Jackson State. What changed? What changed? You were like it was on the tip of your tongue. So what changed?
You know, too many weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Even though Jackson State has Keontae Hampton, the current SWAC Defensive Player of the Week, I just think that UAPB just has too many weapons on offense, Brian. It's just that simple. Too many weapons. Which one of the running backs is going to get off? Is Shannon Patrick going to find Harry Ballard? Or is he going to find DeJuan Miller? You know, pick your poison with them. Whereas if you're UAPB, you know Jackson State is going to run the ball. You know you can put 8 men in the box. You know, Blake Connor can have 10 tackles in this particular game. You know, Xavier Mitchell can have 8 tackles in this game. You know what you're going to get from Jackson State. You don't know exactly how UAPB is going to beat you. That certain level of uncertainty, I think, is going to make the difference in this game, Brian.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we're both on the same side of APB on this one. So this will be an interesting SWAC. Like I said, they get to this point of the season where these games really will start to shape, you know, what happens. And of course, we have another interdivision SWAC contest that we'll be talking about in a couple of games. But let's do this. Before we get into these last 4 games, let's take a pause for the cause, and let's tell you about some of our partners and the people who are helping to promote this. And we're going to take a break. Quick timeout. We'll come right back with the rest of our games. Thanks for watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap. We'll be back right after these words.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Q-Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q-Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q-Time, an Urban Passport member.
This December 21st, the best in HBCU football will collide in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. MEAC versus SWAC. Champion versus champion. Only one team will rise above the rest and claim the coveted Celebration Bowl trophy. Come join the celebration at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this December. For more information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
Wherever you've been, whatever you've been through, we have a warm welcome waiting for you at more than 325 hotels around the world. Book today at DoubleTree.com. DoubleTree by Hilton, where the little things mean everything.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and AD Drew here, reminding you to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MyBCSN1. The number 1 is where you can find the Black College Sports Network. If you want to individually reach out to us, you can find AD at BCSN Drew, DRW. That's where you can find him. You can find me at DRB365. And, of course, you can go to mybcsn.net on the Internet, and that's where you'll find our webpage. All right, so we've already gone through 3 games: University of Charleston at West Virginia State, Shaw at Winston-Salem State, and UAPB at Jackson State. Our next game is an SIAC matchup between Kentucky State at Miles. Miles coming back home, hopefully to drier, better conditions than what they faced in Wilberforce, Ohio at Central State. And, of course, Kentucky State. If West Virginia State is like the 1A of good stories, then Kentucky State might be 1B. Or you might want to rearrange it and say, 1B is West Virginia State and 1A is Kentucky State. So, AD, let's break down this game. You've got up first here, Kentucky State at Miles.
All right. Look at the history of this game. Miles has won 8 of the last 9 games that these two have played. That lone Kentucky State win came in 2016, and that is the year, Brian, I do believe, that forced the SIAC to change their rules as far as who gets to go to the conference championship game. The largest margin of victory. Let's see. Miles has been winning by an average of 13 points in this game, in this particular game, Brian. So it's really been Miles just blowing them out. And I'm going back and look at some of these scores over the past years: 45-0, 45-24, Brian, 40-17. 16.
But I gotta. If I could jump in
30,
for a second.
35-0. And these are all pretty much in the original Ruffin era, Brian.
But this is the only difference is this isn't the same Kentucky State team. I mean, this Kentucky State team, 5-2 record, 4-1 over the last 5 games. They've beaten 2 FCS Division I programs. This is not the same Kentucky State team that we are used to. This one comes in with a defense that's only allowing 17.4 points per game. how much of a factor do you apply to this handicap?
Well, it's ironic that you said 17.4 points a game because Miles is almost averaging double that on offense, Brian, averaging 34.1 points per game, leading the conference in total offense at just a smidge short of 400 yards with 398.5, whereas Kentucky State is giving up 298 yards of on the defensive side. So what Kentucky State will need to do is use that number one SIAC rated rushing offense at 258 yards per game and play keep away from Miles. But that's going to be tough. Miles has the number one rushing defense in the conference. Now, part of that is because Miles has had a tendency to get up big, get up early, and get up often on team. But, Brian, they're only giving up 69 yards running. Something's got to give in this particular game, Brian. Something has to give.
Repeat that. Who's giving up 69 yards per game?
Miles is giving up only 69 yards per game on the ground, Brian.
Right, and we know that's what Kentucky State does. I mean, they're not a passing team. So
at the rate of 258 yards per game on the ground, Brian. So this is strength on strength in this particular game.
Yeah, I don't really know how you handicap two teams, a strength versus strength matchup. I think you just kind of to watch it play out. Okay, AD, so my big question for you is, can Kentucky State still win the SIAC with a victory?
No. Even if they win out, Brian, at worst they will finish tied with Tuskegee. Tuskegee has the head-to-head matchup with the victory at the start of the SIAC season. So the worst thing that happened, they would have a share, but Tuskegee would represent the West even with a loss to Miles if Kentucky State beats Miles next week. The best thing that could happen for there would be 3-2, 4-2. The best thing that could happen is if Tuskegee, Miles, and Kentucky State wind up in a three-way tie, and then that's when you have to get in and do the math. I'm not sure who will win a three-way tie, tie between the three of them.
Chaos.
But I'm going to throw one other thing into that, Brian. Central State also mathematically could still with a three-way tie because Central State and Kentucky State play next week. Central State has Lane this week. Central State is going to be favored against Lane.
Yeah, that's not a gimme though. I mean, that's
I just said they're going to be favored. I didn't say they were going to win. They were going to be favored against Lane, which means Central State, Kentucky State next week with a Kentucky State victory over Miles could be the game that forces that three-way tie, Brian, with Miles, Tuskegee, and the winner of the Central State-Kentucky game. And by me saying that, Miles would have to beat Tuskegee after Miles would lose to Kentucky State. That's where that three-way scenario tie could come into effect.
All right. This is predicted to be a very close ball game. 1 point separating one team versus the other. Literally 1 point. I'm going to go with Miles. I'm going to go with the Miles Golden Bears coming off the tough loss back at home. I think this will be as close as the score is predicted. So I'm just going to stay away from that and just going to say Miles wins this game in a very close game. A very close game. What about you?
You know, Brian, we have no drama in this show because, once again, we agree with each other. I have Miles winning this game, Brian. Miles is the better team. And after coming off that loss to Central State last week, they are going to be inspired. Coach Ruffin is not going to let this happen to him 2 weeks in a row. Miles by a field goal.
All right, there it is, by a field goal. I love it. Okay, let's move over to our next contest, a interdivision SWAC contest between Alabama A&M traveling after the triple overtime Magic City Classic victory with a record of 5-3. 5-3, 2-1 in conference play. Traveling to Southern University to take on the Jaguars for homecoming. It's homecoming in Baton Rouge, and they are 4-4, coming off the tough loss to Alcorn State last week. The Jaguars had a halftime lead, 6-3, and then of course they really did not score again, giving up 24 unanswered in the second half. This game, though, against Alabama A&M, you know, there was a stat running around AD that Dawson Odoms, as the coach of Southern, was something like 46-9 versus SWAC opponents that were not named Alcorn State. You know, and Alcorn, he and the Jaguars have lost 9 of the last 10. And so everybody else in the conference, though, you haven't been beating Southern. And Alabama A&M is a perfect test case of one of those schools that just has not been able to get over the hump in the Dawson Odoms era. Last year, Southern won by a score of 29-27. The year before, 2017. Southern won that game by 21 points, 35-14. The year before that, they won 59-31 by 28 points. And that was really going into the next 3 years, you know, the contest, you'd have 2 overtime games and a 1-point win for Southern, as, you know, Southern would win. And so really that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The last 6 years, Southern has beaten Alabama A&M. The last time Alabama A&M beat Southern, we got to go all the way back to 2012, and that is when the Bulldogs defeated Southern. That was a home game for A&M back then. They actually had to beat them in overtime, 24-23. But it's been since 2007 since A&M has actually won a game at Southern. I mean, that's how long it's been. I mean, we're approaching, let's see, do the quick math, 2007, 2019, what is that, 12 years? It's been 12 years since A&M has gone out to Baton Rouge to win this ball game. So inside the numbers, thanks to the Versus Sport Simulator, we go inside the numbers. Of course, you know, already mentioned the records. The last 5 games, both teams are sitting at 3-2. Neither has fared very well against plus 500 teams. Southern's best win, Arkansas Pine Bluff, just happens to be Alabama A&M's worst loss. I always find those things kind of amusing. You know, one team's best win is another team's best loss. You know, points per game, Alabama A&M averaging 34 points a game, Southern averaging 30. You know, unfortunately, though, A&M is also giving up 34.1 points per game. So, I mean, they're scoring a lot of points, but they're giving up a lot of points as well, while Southern is only giving up 24.9, almost 25 points a game. Anything else? There's really nothing else to say in this contest. I mean, UAPB, Alabama A&M. I wonder how much is in the gas tank after playing a triple overtime emotional game like what they played. I think the first half will be key. I think Southern, if Southern is smart, Southern will jump all over Alabama A&M in the first half. And if by some strange happenstance that Alabama A&M is leading or within maybe a field goal at halftime, I think that will be a big momentum boost, a big confidence boost for them. I mean, again, not only dealing with the streak, but then coming off a triple overtime game last week against your rival. All points would indicate at that point that, hey, this is going to be Alabama A&M's to win. But I'll tell you, AD, the Versus Simulator actually predicts a 22. That's right. I said a 22-point victory for Southern at home on homecoming. What are your thoughts on this game? Who do you predict to win?
Brian, the question is, can Alabama A&M get it up for that type of atmosphere 2 weeks in a row? You know, with the Magic City Classic, you know, that's homecoming on steroids. But the difference between the Magic City Classic and playing and being somebody else's homecoming opponent, you have 50% of the stadium was Alabama A&M fans. You're going into Baton Rouge, as they like to say, and 90% of the people in that stadium will be rooting for the Jaguars in the blue and the gold. And they want to hear this sonic boom of the South. That's all they're getting ready for is halftime, sonic boom of the South. So can you get up for that atmosphere 2 weeks in a row, especially after the first week you had a triple overtime victory against your arch rival? I don't think so, Brian. I think Southern's going to defend home for homecoming. Get the checkbooks ready, Jaguar fans. You're going to want to get this team some extra money because of that victory that they're going to give.
Yeah, I'm going to had the triple overtime game not happened and Alabama A&M just won in regulation, I would probably feel more likely to side with Alabama A&M. But I think the extra time, the extra game, will negatively impact the Bulldogs. It's hard to imagine, like you said, it's homecoming on steroids, and now you've got to turn around and flip the switch just like that and get ready for a new game. And I know Connell Maynor is preaching and saying all the right things to his guys, but, I think college students are college students. So, and then, combine Alabama A&M's big win with Southern's big loss, I think this is a great bounce-back opportunity for Southern. So I'm going to keep our streak going, AD, and I'm going to side with you and pick Southern in this upcoming contest. All right. Let's get ready for one of our two feature games, and you're going to lead us off by talking about Fort Valley State at Savannah State.
Fort Valley State, Savannah State. This is for all the marbles in the SIAC East. Savannah State coming off of a 5-game, count them, Brian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-game road stand. I think that they are the only team who had a worse road stand than Edward Waters did down in Jacksonville with a 4-game road stand. But they came back home last week and for homecoming in front of over 8,000 fans, defeated Albany State.
All right, that's definitely That's a big win for Savannah State there.
Yeah. Both of these teams come into conference into this game with a 4-0 conference record. Fort Valley is you said it last week. Albany is Savannah's oldest rival. Guess who their second oldest rival is, Brian? Fort Valley State.
I was gonna say, maybe the team they're playing this weekend.
Of course it is. This is the 53rd meeting of these two particular teams, and Fort Valley does hold the advantage in this series, 36-12-4. The last time these two teams met was in 2014 for Savannah State's home opener. And now let's remember, Savannah State was Division I at that point in time in the MEAC and lost to Fort Valley State 42-28. So this is senior day in Savannah, Georgia. So, there's going to be a lot of emotion in the crowd for this particular game, Brian. And once again, this game is a big, big, big contrast of styles with Savannah State being a run-first team versus Fort Valley being a pass-first team. We just got through talking about Biles, who was number 2 in the conference in scoring. Guess who's number 1 in the conference in scoring, Brian? The Fort Valley State Wildcats. Savannah State is number 4 in scoring defense at 21 points a game. Fort Valley is averaging 37 points a game on offense. As far as total offense, Fort Valley is accumulating 368 yards per game of total offense. The Savannah State defense is giving up 320 yards of per game on defense. The number 2 team in rushing in the conference at 243 yards is Savannah State. So, and Fort Valley's defense is giving up 140 yards per game, ranked number 7 in the conference. Fort Valley leads the conference in passing offense, 316 yards per game. Savannah State is 8th in the conference, 214 yards per game. Statistically, Brian, Fort Valley has the better stats. But they play a lot more glitzier and glamour than the smash mouth Savannah State Tigers. Savannah State's going to have to control the ball. They're going to have to keep the ball away from this Fort Valley offense in order to have an opportunity to win this game, Brian. That's what it's going to have to come down to. But I don't think it's going to happen, Brian. I really don't think it's going to happen. I think Fort Valley just has a little bit too much for Savannah State, and Savannah State will actually, Brian. Savannah State or Fort Valley, one of them is going to be in the driver's seat to win the state of Georgia. If a Fort Valley victory here and then a Fort Valley victory next week over Albany gives Fort Valley the Georgia title, versus Savannah State victory here will give them the Georgia title. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
So your official pick is whom?
Wildcats.
Wildcats. All right. We have another case of one team's best win is another team's worst loss, and that is what we have in this. As I ran the sports simulator, Fort Valley State, one of their 6 wins was against Florida Tech. It just so happens that Florida Tech beat Savannah State and was actually Savannah State's worst loss of the year. So whenever you're trying to break down 2 teams that are similar, you did a great job with all the numbers and all that. I'm just looking for anything that sort of validates my thought here, and my thought is that the streak, 6 wins in a row, will continue. And I'm gonna, it's probably what the SIAC is rooting for too, as they're probably rooting quietly for Fort Valley State, so that there is no chaos happening in the, in the opening, or I guess no chaos scenarios that'll come out of this contest. So I'm going to side with, man, I hate to do it again, but I'm siding with you on Fort Valley State going on the road, winning this contest. Although I will say we are really, really on the wrong side of this prediction, as Savannah State is predicted to win this contest by 8 points at home. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of ground to give up, but 8 points is what Savannah State is favored to win.
And I'm going to tell you how Savannah State could win that game, Brian. Time of possession. Savannah State is just shy of 34 minutes per game to Fort Valley's 28 minutes per game. And we know part of that is because Fort Valley can score and score quickly. If Savannah State can shorten the game with their running attack and keep the ball out of Fort Valley's hands, they will have more than a puncher's chance to beat Fort Valley. But I'm still siding with the Wildcats.
Okay, good to know. All right, so that's a key matchup in the SIAC. And now we go to our BCSN versus game of the week. And that game between the North Carolina A&T Aggies, who are ranked number 3 in our BCSN poll, right? And South Carolina State ranked number 4. It also should be noted in the versus sports simulation or in the versus rankings, computer rankings, both of these teams are ranked in the top 20, as South Carolina State ranked 19th and North Carolina A&T ranked 20th. Very likely that the winner of this game stays in. The loser will find themselves sitting outside of the top 25, most likely. North Carolina A&T 5-2, South Carolina State 5-2. Both teams with a loss to Florida A&M. That is for both teams the quote unquote worst loss. So that part is there. Both teams have a win over a PWI FCS. North Carolina A&T beat Elon. South Carolina State beat Wofford. That's pretty impressive. They also have a big-time 30-point loss to an FBS school. North Carolina A&T lost by 32 points to Duke. South Carolina State lost by 39 to South Florida. Man, it's amazing how all of these things seem to line up with one another here, AD. So what is it that anyone would reasonably use when they're looking at two teams and saying, well, I don't know, who am I going to pick? And that's the hard part about this kind of game, because I think this game will go. I'd be shocked if we had a game that finished up like what we saw last week in Daytona Beach between Bethune and North Carolina, not North Carolina A&T, but South Carolina State. I think South Carolina State at home will definitely have a tougher road to get to where they want to be. And again, the loser of this contest, let me set the stage. The loser of this contest will have a second conference loss, and that will put them one full game behind Bethune-Cookman and the winner of this game. So if it's A&T, A&T still has a matchup against Bethune upcoming. So this week and next, all will shape what they predict to happen in this season. I'm trying to see, are there any other numbers here that stand out here. I really don't think there is.
The one thing that's interesting, these teams pretty much rank 1 through 3 in just about every major statistical category in the MEAC. So you talk about two teams that are very evenly matched. These are those two teams, Brian. You do not see any major statistic where one team is head and shoulders above the other one. If they're not right behind each other in the statistical category, there's one team in between them on just about every category, Brian. I mean, wow, this is
the crazy part about this. The Versus Sports Simulator and running the simulation has an A&T. Well, hold on. Well, yeah, no. I'll go ahead and read the score. I realized I didn't go over a couple things I wanted to. They have a score of A&T 32, South Carolina State 23. So that's a 9-point victory and it sort of falls in line with what has happened the last few years in this series. I mean, A&T last year won this 31-16. 2 years ago, they won 21-7. 3 years ago, they won 30-20. The last time we had a close ball game was 2015. A&T won 9-6. And the last time that South Carolina State actually won was in 2014, where they won 13-0. It should be noted, that the 2 years in this, I'd say over the last decade, the 2 years when South Carolina State has managed to win a game over North Carolina A&T, they have had the better record. You've seen they were able to springboard into a complete season. South Carolina State also were 8 and 9 win teams in those 2 years, 2014 and 2013. You were going to say something?
Just trying to find something that's going to sway me one way or the other. The one thing that you cannot predict when you do these things is turnovers. North Carolina A&T is number 2 in turnover margin in the conference. South Carolina State is number 5. With A&T at a +7, South Carolina State at a +3. Something else to keep in mind: A&T leads the conference in time of possession at almost 32 minutes per game. South Carolina State is at 29 minutes per game. Here's one other one, Brian, and I had to dig deep to get these. Red zone, Brian. A&T is 25 of 28 this year in the red zone, scoring 9 touchdowns and 10 field goals. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Scoring 15 touchdowns and 10 field goals. South Carolina State is 19 of 27 in the red zone, scoring 14 touchdowns and 5 field goals.
All right, let's get to prediction time here. Again, the Versus Sports Simulator says A&T 32, South Carolina State 23. I think that's high. I think, that it's hard to bet against the computer when there's a 73% win probability, and they've been hitting correctly at about 78% of the time. That's pretty impressive. On survival alone, bread and water, no extra amenities, North Carolina A&T finds a way to win. I'm going to go with the Aggies. I'm going to go with the Aggies on the road. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with the Aggies on the road.
Brian, I think we have gone a perfect 7 for 7.
Ridiculous.
And I am also going with the Aggies in this game, and I think it's going to come down to a late turnover. They're going to generate a late turnover. That's going to be the difference in the game.
You know, it's funny you mentioned turnovers because I think that's the one thing that South Carolina State has been able to do really well. They had a pick six against Florida A&M. They had a pick six against Bethune. I know I'm not going to change my pick, but I am going to say if the game is going to swing, it's going to be because of a mistake made by who? North Carolina A&T that gives South Carolina State maybe a scoop and score or a pick six. Something like that's going to happen that, you know, could possibly flip this game over South Carolina State's side, but I'm going to roll with the Aggies. Yeah, I think I will. I'm going to roll with the Aggies. All right, and so you go with the Aggies too. And so, yeah, just to recap, both AD and I picked West Virginia State over University of Charleston. We both picked Winston-Salem State over Shaw. We both picked UAPB over Jackson State. We both picked Miles over Kentucky State. We both picked Southern over Alabama A&M. We both picked Fort Valley State over Savannah State, and then we both picked A&T. With North Carolina A&T over South Carolina State, and now I feel absolutely sick. I feel sick that is what we're. You know, we won't make up any ground this week, but I just feel sick that we went this route, and so it is what it is, right?
Yes, sir.
One little final piece of housekeeping that we wanted to get to, and I'm just going to be very brief here, AD. So I said we mentioned the Southwestern Athletic Conference and the MEAC and their preseason polls and such. I have not pulled up the GCAC, so maybe AD, while I go through this, you're able to pull up your information that you have on the GCAC. So let's start in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. I'll go men and then women's. On the men's side, it's the Prairie View A&M Panthers that were picked to finish first in the preseason poll this year. The Panthers finished last season with a 17-1 record in league play, and they did win the SWAC regular season tournament title. They won the regular season and tournament title. So Prairie View A&M with a very solid season in 2018-2019. Texas Southern, who actually averages 81.6 points a game. That was the best average of any team. They finished their regular season 24-14. They were predicted to finish second, followed behind Grambling State, Alabama State, Jackson State, Southern, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Alabama A&M, Alcorn, and Mississippi Valley State. That was your top 10. The preseason player of the year was Devontae Patterson of Prairie View. No, not Prairie View. Alcorn State. Devontae Patterson averaged 13.5 points a game, 5 assists per game in 28 minutes. The defensive player of the year came in Javius McKinnis, and he was the defensive player of the year. The SWAC first team had a guard from Alcorn State, Maurice Howard. From Grambling, Ivy Smith Jr. For Texas Southern, Eden Ewing. And from Prairie View, you had Devontae Patterson and Javius McKinnon. And so that's pretty much the men's side. Over on the women's side, real quick, over on the women's side, it's Jackson State who garnered the most total points, outdistancing second place Prairie View A&M. And third predicted was Alabama State, followed by Texas Southern. Texas Southern's Nia Mitchell was selected as the SWAC Preseason Player and Defensive Player of the Year. The senior from Bay City, Texas, coming off an excellent junior season where she averaged a double-double with 14.4 points and 10.7 rebounds per contest. And so I don't really see anything else in there to add. Of course, I mentioned Mitchell as the Player of the Year. They predicted, let's see, the preseason All-SWAC first team, guard Jayla Crawford from Alabama State, guard Alaric Scott from Southern, forward Nia Mitchell, Texas Southern, the forward Marnisha Hammer of Jackson State, and then the center is Alexis Evans. And so, again, the predicted order of finish on the women's side actually has Southern predicted to finish first, followed by Jackson State, Prairie View A&M, Alabama State, Texas Southern, Grambling State, Alabama A&M, Mississippi Valley State, Alcorn State, and Arkansas. So all right. I thought I was missing something there. All right, let me move out of the SWAC over to the MEAC quickly before we get ready to wrap up. On the men's side, Clattrell Pope of Bethune-Cookman was the preseason Player of the Year for the men. Pope is actually also, he was the 2019 MEAC Defensive Player of the Year. He's a 6'9" senior forward from Northport, Alabama. He led the nation, that's the nation, in offensive rebounds per game, and he finished 11th in defensive rebounds per game. He was the only player to average a double-double in the MEAC. He averaged 13.8 points and 12.2 rebounds per game. That was pretty impressive. North Carolina Central was predicted to win their third straight MEAC tournament championship under Coach Lavelle Moten, and the Eagles went 10-6 in MEAC play last year, 18-16 overall, and last year they made their third NCAA tournament appearance. The order of finish for teams, again, North Carolina Central, Bethune-Cookman second, Norfolk State and North Carolina A&T tied for third, and South Carolina State tied for second. All of those schools receiving first place votes. So that's pretty impressive. The bottom half consists of Howard, Coppin State, Morgan State, FAMU, who is not eligible this year, Delaware State, and Maryland Eastern Shore. Maryland Eastern Shore. First team players, Malik Maitland for Bethune. Of course, Clattrell Pope, we just mentioned, the 6'9" senior from Bethune. DeJuan Clayton, guard from Coppin State. Charles Williams, a guard from Howard. And then Damani Applewhite comes in as a forward, finishing off the starting lineup, and he is at North Carolina State right now. So that's pretty much the men's side. Over on the women's side, we got to go with a young lady from North Carolina A&T State, senior guard, Sikoria Foy. She was selected as the Player of the Year for the conference. Foy helped North Carolina A&T to a 16-0 record in league play from a year ago. She scored 13.4 points a game, 2.7 assists per game, and she had a steals average of 2.6 steals per game. In conference play, she averaged 14 points, 2.8 assists, and a game high 8 assists per game. She ranked 8th in the league in those categories. Blah blah blah. Let me finish all that. What should be noted here about North Carolina A&T's perfect 16-0 league play is they were unable to advance to the NCAA tournament because they lost in the semifinals of the MEAC tournament. It was Bethune-Cookman who went on to win the MEAC tournament, and they got the automatic bid. North Carolina A&T went to the WNIT, and this will be the first of many times you hear me say, memo to small conferences, stop playing postseason tournaments. If you want to play a tournament, do it in the middle of the conference season, just for the sake of having a tournament, single elimination. But you conferences having an end of the season tournament, all you do is run the risk of your best team getting knocked out. For example, North Carolina A&T going 16-0, getting knocked out because they're playing in some tournament at the end of the season, and they get sent down to the WNIT. Whereas, who knows if things had worked out right, Anyway, that won't be the first time you hear me rant about that in basketball. I don't know why small conferences want to do that. The predicted order of finish on the women's side: North Carolina A&T with 12 first-place votes, Bethune-Cookman with 8, followed by Howard, Norfolk State, Maryland Eastern Shore, South Carolina State, Morgan State, North Carolina Central, Delaware State, Coppin State, and then Florida A&M. Secoria Foy on the first team as a guard, along with fellow guards Sarah Edmond of Howard and Ashanti Hunt of Bethune-Cookman. The forwards on that team, Chance Graham and Taylor Brown. For more information, I encourage you to go to the MEACsports.com. AD, were you able to pull up anything for the GCAC?
Yes, I was, Brian. Yes, I was. I have the GCAC information, and let's start off on the women's side this particular time. We'll start from the bottom. Predicted to finish number 8 in the conference, Tougaloo. Number 7, SUNO, Southern University of New Orleans. Number 6 is Russ College. Number 5, Philander Smith. Number 4, defending conference champion Dillard, and they received 2 first-place votes. And then there was a tie for the number 2 spot between last year's conference tournament runner-up Edward Waters and Xavier University, who received 1 vote for first place, and predicted to win the conference on the women's side, receiving 4 first-place votes, 51 points total, or the Talladega Tornadoes, depending on how you want to emphasize that middle syllable there, Brian. So they did not release, or I do not have in front of me who the preseason players of the year were for the conference. So we're not going to single out anybody, although they have had players named Player of the Week thus far, Brian. Going over to the men's side, number 8, Russ. Number 7 is going to be Suno. Number 6, Philander Smith. Number 5, Edward Waters. Number 4, defending conference champion, Tougaloo. And let me rephrase that, Brian. Tougaloo and Edward Waters were actually tied, both receiving 36 votes, but Tougaloo received 1 first-place vote. So both of those teams are tied for the number 4 spot. Number 3 is going to be Dillard. Number 2, receiving 1 first-place vote, is going to be Xavier. And the number 1 team in the conference, and the preseason conference sweep, Brian, goes to the Talladega Tornadoes. receiving 48 points in the preseason poll, Brian.
That's AD Drew. I'm Brian Fulford. Thanks for watching and listening. Enjoy the week ahead. Take care. God bless, and peace out.
Holla.
But you stay on hard.
It's like a loop machine. Going around town trying to get down.
This December 21st, the best in HBCU football will collide in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. MEAC versus SWAC. Champion versus champion. Only one team will rise above the rest and claim the coveted Celebration Bowl trophy. Come join the celebration at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this December. For more information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
I've been waiting for days to come like this, better than ever before. And now I know there's more.
Wherever you've been, whatever you've been through, we have a warm welcome waiting for you at more than 325 hotels around the world. Book today at DoubleTree.com. DoubleTree by Hilton, where the little things mean everything.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.